very old men now, who were Nazi hunters inside the U.S. Army, and they burglarized the Vatican's rat line, the smuggling system, and found out how it was going. And the State Department ordered them hands off. And I had that in writing. So, yeah, it was one of the most despicable things that our State Department had ever done. I was astonished.
Yeah, it's incredible. Can you get more into the cover-up? How many documents have been destroyed and leaked and lost and covered up and kept under secrecy? And how did you get access to them?
Well, you know, the funny thing is, you can't really destroy top-secret files because there's too many copies. And anytime you want to destroy a top-secret file, you have to make records of its destruction. So the best thing to do is misfile them. So they dumped the Nazi records out in the vault where the nuclear secrets were stored. So I was a newly appointed Nazi hunter. I thought I'd get a free trip to Germany out of it. Knew nothing about the subject. But because I had all these super high security clearances, I needed them to get into the vaults. There are 20 vaults underground at Suitland, Maryland. Each vault is 1 acre in size. And top secret won't even get you close to getting inside. You need much, much higher. So I was the first guy in a half a century who had every security clearance under the books. I was the only one who could go to the index in Vault 2 and find out that there was a Nazi file on someone, and then go down to Vault 6 and read that he had been recruited by the State Department. So I spent 2 years going through the classified files of every U.S. and NATO agency. And I was appalled at the incompetence. We actually had one American spy agency inside the State Department that lied to all the others. And it really wrecked American security. We actually had a chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Saakashvili, and he didn't know that his own daddy was a Nazi war criminal. We couldn't even do basic security checks. That's how much damage our State Department did. Those guys, I'm not saying they should have been hung, but they should have been prosecuted and gone to jail. The guys who should have been hung were the people like Allen Dulles that helped Hitler during the war and then covered it up afterwards.
Can you elaborate on his role during the war?
Yeah, Allen Dulles was the American intelligence chief in Switzerland during the war. And 40% of the wartime supplies for the Third Reich moved through Switzerland. And these supplies have been bought and paid for by Dulles' American clients and some British clients. So Dulles was sort of a double agent. He was supposedly working for the Americans to get intelligence on Germany. But at the same time, he was really mostly working for the Nazis to protect his client's investment, to launder the funds, if you will. And he was very good at that.
So if you look at all the behind-the-scenes stuff going on with the networking and the money that was there, what becomes the real narrative of World War II? Why were we fighting? Was justice served, and who won the war? What happened at Nuremberg? How many people were really prosecuted compared with the real Nazi apparatus, and how many people got away? You see what I'm asking?
Now, World War II was a righteous war if there ever was one. I mean, Hitler and Nazism and their cruel racist doctrines had to be stopped. I mean, it wasn't a question really of a choice. Hitler would have kept on invading one country after another until somebody stopped him. Mm-hmm. And the British said no, and we agreed with the British that this time this man had to be stopped. The corruption didn't really come on the American side until much later. We were Boy Scouts. We were the last nation on earth that kept hunting Nazi war criminals. We tried to do the right thing. My first boss was actually a Nuremberg prosecutor at the bankers' trial, the Nazi bankers. You see, President Roosevelt wanted to put the German bankers on trial so that they would say, but we were only doing what the American bankers asked us to do. And that way, the German bankers at the Nuremberg trial would wipe out the whole funding base of the Republican Party at Wall Street. By some estimates, nearly 70% of the funds that went to build the Third Reich before World War II came from Wall Street. And again, those guys that kept the money flowing and covered it up, That was giving aid and comfort to the enemy in time of war. And my own Justice Department was despicable. We had, I think there were more than 150 Americans from different companies who stayed in Nazi Germany during the war to help the Nazis run their companies. General Motors truck companies, Ford oil companies. And these guys were arrested after the war, kept in a special prison, and they were all released, every one. They never were charged as traitors. They should have been.
Absolutely. Absolutely, they should have been. Can you talk about Ashcan and Dustbin and the financiers being held there and what happened?
Yeah, Ashcan and Dustbin, those were the code names of the very special prison camp where the American and British Nazi collaborators, the traitors, were being kept. Now, there's a buddy of mine, Don Jensen, who's still alive. He's one of the guards at the camp. It was a British camp, the British zone, but it had American guards. So no matter who came nosing around, you could say, well, you're British, this is an American problem, go away, or the other way around. Now, one of the guards, Don, when he's a young private, turned to one of the Americans and said, what are you doing here? He said, I'm not going to be here long. I work for the Chase Bank. My friends will get me out of here. And Don said, what makes you so sure they even want to recognize you? The man just laughed. Now, the prisoner was right. He was let go. All of them were let go. Ashcan Dustbin was the heart of the cover-up. A lot of, people say, oh, conspiracy theories. This was a crime. Ashcan Dustbin was a prison camp that contained American and British collaborators who stayed in Nazi Germany during the war. They should have been put on trial for treason, but putting them on trial would have exposed the Rockefellers, the Walkers, the Bushes, the Harrimans, the Kennedys, and so on.
And mind you, Harriman and Bush money was frozen at one point through the Union Bank, but then they were never prosecuted. And I'm sure there are dozens, if not hundreds, of examples like that, right?
Yeah, well, see, Union Bank in New York was run by Prescott Bush. Actually, he was sort of the alcoholic son-in-law. He was dumped on all the boards, but he didn't do much. The evil guy was his father-in-law, Herbert Walker, as in George Herbert Walker Bush.
Right.
Herbert Walker was the real genius that got us involved with the Nazis. So Prescott's in charge of the Union Bank and also some companies that helped Auschwitz, if you can believe it. But there were three banks. There was one in Berlin, one in Amsterdam, one in New York. So no matter which side won World War II, one of the banks would pop up and say, hi, I'm neutral. Give us all our property back. And that's what happened. The Amsterdam Bank popped up and said, oh, those nasty Nazis stole all our corporate property in Germany. Please give it back to us. And the Allies did. So, you don't have to, smuggle the money out and have gold trains. You just have to move pieces of paper to show that, whichever bank you want really owns the property. And that was a very clever theft. That's what happened. They paid off Prince Bernhard of Netherlands, the Crown Prince.
Right.
I guess he made over $1 billion in this covering up the Nazi money laundering through the Netherlands after the war.
See, that's what I mean. I'm not trying to connect dots when they're not there, but you've got Prince Bernhard, who later founded the Bilderberg Group, carried so many of these big American financiers, the Europeans as well, and you see the Harrimans from Union Banking, you see the Wiseman, John J. McCloy, you see George Kennan, all of these people, part of this network that's involved in covering up for the whole Nazi thing.
I interviewed some of these guys. I called up McCloy. He was, I think he just retired as chairman at the Chase National Bank. And I said, look, you were the American High Commissioner of Germany. How in God's name could you pardon these Nazi war criminals who had been convicted at Nuremberg of financial crimes? And he said, oh, is it the request of the Vatican? And I bet it was, Now, the Vatican wanted to get its money back. Hitler was very clever. There was a big financial settlement with Mussolini and the Pope before World War II, and all that money was stupidly invested in Nazi Germany. So to keep the Vatican quiet about his atrocities during the war, Hitler would just dribble the money back to the Vatican. As long as they kept their mouth shut about the killing of the Jews, they'd get their money back. So, if you want to talk about horrible conspiracies that actually happened, start with the Vatican Bank. That place is obscene. I had volunteered to help a group of people sue the Vatican Bank because we have documents, American classified files, showing, for example, money stolen from Croatian Jews was laundered through Switzerland, through the Vatican Bank, to Nazis in South America. Well, gee, a lot of that money stuck to the Vatican's hands. The Vatican secretly controls some of the largest reinsurance companies. So, yeah, the Vatican became the money launderer of choice. These guys, by the way, you can't say that it was an ideological conspiracy. They tried to fund both Hitler and Stalin. Okay? They didn't care who won. It was all about the money.
Sure. So I didn't get to read through your whole book, but I did notice where you brought up Kissinger and how you've had some confrontations with Henry Kissinger over the years, and you've read his files. Tell us what you found out about him.
You know, it's funny. Seymour Hersh was doing a big expose on Henry Kissinger, Price of Power. And just as his book was in galleys, just before it was to be printed, someone at CIA said, how can you do a book about Kissinger without interviewing Loftus? He's the only one who's read all the Kissinger files. And so Hersh flew up to my law office in Boston and said, well, what do you know about Kissinger? And I said, well, do you want to start with his intelligence background after the war? He said, you mean Kissinger was a spy? He said, oh, yeah. I can't prove that Henry Kissinger ever recruited Nazis, but I can prove that he worked at every classified file center where the records of the Nazis were stored. And Hersh was stunned, so I became his secret source, and he added a whole bunch of stuff in the book. And when the book came out, it was a big success. And Henry Kissinger's lawyers called Seymour Hersh and threatened to sue. And it was all about the Nazi information. And Hersh called me up and said, and you know what? I told him I just got the information from Loftus. And they hung up the phone. They never called back. So, yeah, I think Henry Kissinger is one of the worst people in American history.
He's a Nobel Peace Prize winner.
Yeah, so is
Yes, sir. Can you get more into the Justice Department, their larger role in this and so many other incidences, really working against justice, as you argue in many cases?
You know, it was so sad. There was a special law that Justice set up where the intelligence agencies could bring up to 100 people a year who weren't eligible to get visas to America, let alone become citizens. But the 100 Persons a Year Act was run by the Justice Department. And they brought in like the head of the Ukrainian Gestapo. His name was Mykola Lebed. Guy became a U.S. citizen. And the Justice Department had to cover it up because the Attorney General's signature was on the file. So they